The preamble of the Communist Manifesto really puts forth the footing that it starts on. And again, I'm not a historian, but my understanding of the positioning of communism at this point was very much a vague branding, in the same way very much as today we still use the term fascist, and even at the time of its high rise back in the early and mid 1900s. Save that, in the case of communism, it wanted to make itself very much known and recognized as a potential, and a significant one at that could challenge, and was already being taken seriously, if not in its concrete terms, then in its abstract ones. Furthermore, that it was intended to be an international movement, not limited or constrained by any nationality or other borders that would be imposed, or is explicit, if not implicit, in many other movements, see nationalism. Are you aiming for me, buddy? Is that supposed to have my name on it? Are you angry? Are you upset? Did I hurt your fifis? Well, that's tough, lad. I'll go over here now. Oh, okay. You decided that you had enough. Part 1 of the Communist Manifesto effectively takes as axioms that of class struggle, that there are two predominating categories of all societies throughout all history, of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, where the bourgeoisie are those that have made themselves the industrial leads, the heads of all production of society, by claiming such means as property. They thereby, under the processes of production, concentrate so much authority, power, and wealth into their own hands, away from that of the rest of society, that the entire rest of society essentially falls into the propertyless, the wealthless, the slaves of a master that can no longer keep the slave, yet holds their bondage as absolute, and that as a consequence, the bourgeoisie guarantee their own destruction. They possess so much and impoverish all around them that is not directly connected to them, that it is inevitable that the proletariat will overtake them.
Energy. Give yourself to the cause.
That's not what your energy can do for you, but what you can do for your energy. That's the vibe right there. Funny we should encounter that line right after taking a gander through the Communist Manifesto. How about that? The response that I have to part 1 is that it is more or less, at least in its axioms, correct that there is a problem of inequality, that there is a tendency for those of leadership, authority, whatever they should happen to be, to view as mere materials every single individual thing that is under their domain, and thereby to render them without any means of survival, as a matter of consequence of not overproduction, but rather, and I think far more appropriately identified, exploitation in the extreme. In the same way that a field might have all of its valuable nutrients and microbiome torn from it in the pursuit of yielding the most crop therefrom, requiring therefore the continual renewal of it by artificial means, so too can all members of society fall under such an effect. However, keeping in the analogy, instead of attempting to draw out every little bit one may from that field, simply, and rather what this part is most ardently criticizing, my proposed solution would instead be to invent new means of addressing the exact same task. And just like I was thinking earlier, this is beautiful to navigate. This really does feel like we started from the bottom, and now we're here. Regard these as systems, which may, or may not, be managed as renewable resources, to consider not just the individual instance of a thing in a vacuum, but to pragmatically assess the setting within which it is framed, where then not only do you have the capacity to observe the reduction of everything, but also the whole within which that system is nested, by which that system exists, such that instead of, in the process of resolving one problem, creating an entire set of others, you resolve the one problem and set into motion the preservation of cycles ideals by which we may all be sustained, to include the substrate that is providing such resolutions. In sum, a technologic means of preservation, not only those here identified as the bourgeoisie, but also as the proletariat, and the dissemination of such information amongst the greatest numbers possible without restriction, coupled with the social awareness of what they are doing and how it can be done, for there is no resolution to any human mode of survival, or we do not come instinctively with such things as animals, by any other means, save for reason, and therefore the technic. And just like in Ratchet and Clank, I really want to go over to those areas and see what's hiding within, but I know it's instant death if I go. But that's always been a thing with me. Any place that's supposed to be off limits or otherwise unavailable to the player, because I know that the devs will have something there that I'm not meant to see, that, well, we'll find out if we can traverse it. It makes me want to go there every single time. And I don't think that there is a better analog for that makes me feel that way than Fallout games. Just because there's so much that absolutely wasn't even meant to be bothered with by other devs. A broad canvas, or even the most minor of inclusion, has a story behind it that stands out very disjointedly from the rest of the whole. Chapter 2 reviews and regards predominantly what the bourgeoisie has characterized reality itself by as a reflecting consequence of its own rationalizations of how it attained power in and by itself, and thereby sets itself apart. The communists set aside as the most forward-facing, whole-facing group of the proletariat, which has always acted on its behalf and takes the greatest pains to preserve their ideal. That man is itself not an independent agency, that is a bourgeois notion, rather that the entirety of their material surroundings, in combination with their perceptions thereof, shape every little detail of the spirit of a man, and that mankind embraces not only males, but also females, as there is no distinction between the labor which they output, that there is, in fact, no characterization which belongs to the proletariat natively, and rather that these are matters that are forced upon them by such bourgeoisie justifications. Hey, don't worry, buddy. I got something for you, and something for you. And, I even have... Hang on, wait a minute. Santa's coming around. And there you go. Merry Christmas. Totally fucking with it. And that the ideal conclusion to all of their efforts, although it will look different dependent on the time and place, that there shall be a dictatorship of the people, an erasure of class antagonism by the mode of all of the proletariat, which has no character, no property, ownership of itself, let alone its own activities. It shall dissolve upwardly all classes which would seek to reactionarily or conservatively retain all forms of bourgeoisie influence. Sidestep all of human history, which it identifies as defined by class struggle between these two powers, and it will settle for itself the right of every individual to their individual labors. And those individual labors will be for the betterment of all of the proletariat, that no one should ever subjugate another, and rather that all should benefit all. No! Why? Shit. My response to the second part of the Communist Manifesto is that definitionally, what this is, just as all forms of centralization, and within its own framework, which I believe identifies this correctly, that it is a subjugation of everyone to everyone, and that unlike some phenomena, when everybody has subjugation, that does not mean that nobody has subjugation, that the aspects which they characterize as explicitly bourgeoisie are not. They are not all outgrowths of an exploiter-exploited relation. Instead, they are attempts to find the index of where we are as beings, ontologically, metaphysically, socially, within this universe. That familial bonds do, have, and will persist in continuing regardless of any communistic ideations. That human relationships writ large are based on more than simple money, and the means whereby capital is attained. That those who found themselves entirely upon such relations, without regard for any reason, care for things beyond, exist as a minute portion of society, some of which are within what they would classify the bourgeoisie, and are indeed the enemy of everyone, with cares that extend beyond. Throughout the entire experience of the game thus far, I have not been forced to enter into many arenas like this, where it's an interstitial point that I couldn't just go past. I wonder if I can just run past all of the various demons and ghouls. We'll find out. I'll take that armor. Thank you very much. And you can get bent. I'll be over here, thanks. Yep, I'm sure that you're very hellish and knightly. But, no thanks. Yep. Let's not whiff this jump, because that would be less than ideal. Whoop! Whoop! Yeah, I absolutely could just have ran past them each and every time. For everyone who is alive, including those who would subscribe to a communistic framework, do have to consider the economic implications, and by that I mean management of all resources. Part of what is being managed are those labels, those social relations, those commodities of identity, which have nothing to do with wage labor. They supersede, and in many cases supervene, all such forms of exploitation. Why? Because contrary to the axiom that one's material conditions are the only effector of one's consciousness, at least within societies that have embraced enlightenment values or admit them minimally, place in our hands not only our instincts, but our intuitions, and our intellects that supervene upon all of these. That the intellect does exist independently from one's material conditions. And while I don't agree with the religious messaging that surrounds that, that is what they have pointed to since their inception, all the way back when, in the proto-religions of shamanism or animism. In simple terms, reason supersedes whether you're poor or rich. Just look at the foolish rich and the brilliant poor.
That's an argent accumulator she's carrying. She'll try to use it to open a portal manually into hell.
Helltube! The screen-filling expanse of industrial-styled sci-fi structure reminisces of Ratchet & Clank, specifically the first game. While I'm not sure what kinds of inspirations the dev team took for the shading, which I think is really doing it, along with the skybox, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of that in here. And no matter whether that's the case, as every start thus far, it sure makes for an enticing place to go and explore.
Welcome to the UAC, home of the patented Argent Energy Filtration System developed by Dr. Olivia Pierce. We are the only corporation with this technology, able to convert pure hell energy into clean, controllable Argent energy. It powers this facility and
Clean.
passes throughout the universe from Argent Tower, providing all the energy a family needs to live a fun and productive life on Earth and the surrounding colonies. But we can't do it alone. It takes a team to make it happen. A team of people full of energy, potential energy. Unleash your potential with the UAC. Thank you for your interest in Argent Energy.
Wait, so you're telling me that the Hell guy here, the Slayer, is going to do the equivalent of a Horus heresy and absolutely discombobulate the entire human experiment out in space by having gotten rid of the tower? Spicy. Pretty base, TBH. The story in and of itself does follow a rather well-trodden path of corporation gone mad. The interesting bit of it being that this is madness infused with hell, although that is a fairly common implication of most of these anyway, even if it's not explicit. So while there is some originality to be had, you really have to look for it. And within that originality, it doesn't feel especially expressed as an independent characteristic, and more just as a sidebar to the ultraviolence that we enjoy from Doom. Oh, so no, it's only just dealing with Earth. They don't even have any place else in space. At least from what I can glean from this. Sad. You're telling me that Earth has unlimited hell energy, and all they're doing with it is fueling normal Earth? Like, as much as I'm not a fan of the dude, where are the Elon Musks of the Doom lore? Come on, we can do better than that. No! Oh! Where? Oh, there we go. Now, having the double jump and dying in the manner that we just did, which was falling off of this area I'm about to traverse, eliminates something crucial that I think goes overlooked frequently within level design, is that a lot of the difficulty in platforming really only sources from control management, and that it's not necessarily that an environment is complex. While that can add challenge unto itself, depending on the depth of complexity, especially if you're looking at a 3-dimensional or even higher dimensional environ. Even within, it's all about what tools of navigation are you handed and how tricksy are they. Can your degree of human command match your degree of mechanic control necessary for said environment? And carry on with the regular routine. Explode, please. Thank you. This entry into the lore is the single most narratively potent that we have encountered thus far. The others do provide a bit of establishment for the kind of story that they're trying to tell, the place that the factions have within it, and why exactly Doom Guy is doing the dooming bit. But this one gives us enough detail about the pragmatics, such that we know that the UAC is the provider of energy and therefore has Earth over a barrel, effectively, such that they are the life support system of all humankind on the mother planet. That there is some kind of spiritual element that is directly correlative between the science of this game and the spirituality of Judeo-Abrahamic faiths, and that the UAC has genuine dominion over all of this science by way of being the pioneers on the spot. New database. Neutron activation. Interesting. So it's literally condensed hellfire. That's quite something. Prometheid Terra. Clever. Spiritual energy field theory. Interesting. So, luminiferous aether comes back around in 2016 with Doom. How about that? The Global Science Council went, hey, how'd that work? And they went, no. Don't ask. And looking back at the comments, nobody says Dead Space pairing with Mary's Frankenstein was what made me wonder about the themes of the game. There's the urgent energy being gained from dabbling with what is essentially connection hell. To the former comment, yes. While I think that there is a Promethean element to be had from the review of Frankenstein, I think more than anything it's a story of the other, of that which is afraid to be approached, which is capable of participating in the human experience more than any one of the common characters that we see throughout, because it has not been put through the process of separating itself from all of its environs, all of the things which enable what we call the essence of humanity to be. And from what I recall of Dead Space, that there is a delineation, a slower or quicker falling away from what we call humanity, while maintaining the subjective experience of our character. That is what I think will make it pair very well. Can't believe they depleted plutonium and uranium simultaneously. Especially with our ability to synthesize various elements, I would imagine that ultimately could create synthetic radioactive materials if we really had to. If there was enough push on the scientific front, we could get there. I mean, we can already synthesize gold. Yeah, a little bit of chemistry fact, a little bit of material science. We actually did find out how to transmute, use the old terminology, various other materials into gold. I really am not sure what that hatch would have been used for, outside of course, game level design. The fact that they use buckle locks, as per what nobody said, is very, very, old school. But I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I guess that the alternative might be something like magnetic, but the kinds of concerns that come with that, especially if you have a passive, non-powered, non-electromagnetic lock, it could pose some very significant challenges in the case of power loss. And while it seems like they're counting on not having power loss at any point, that's not to say that they might not have planned in contingency for it. Hey, and I got my vacuum upgrade. Very nice. Means I can suck the entire game through. I'd suppose more along the lines of nanotech being used to essentially seal containers seamlessly until someone with the correct biochem signature came along to engage them. Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad mechanism, at least if the seal wasn't exceptionally strong, which does impose some restrictions on what we would be able to get away with. Now, I do understand that very recently we have come to develop some polypeptide chains that can self-heal, and that their only requirement is some amount of hydration. They are a phenomenal adhesive, so there's a lot of promise on that. It can also be transparent as well, which is phenomenally useful if we want to make things like self-healing plates, self-healing slides, or various types of microscope and the like. But as far as a seal for a door, I think that it would have some promise as well. Self-healing windows would be an incredible game changer for cars and trucks, as nobody points out. Yeah, not only self-healing auto glass, but also self-healing dining ware, both for eating upon and eating with as utensils, glasses, cups, all sorts of things of that manner, naturally. But we also have various instruments and utilities like, can you imagine for a moment if all of our surgical instruments and tools, like scalpels and clamps and the sort, in the environments of human tissues and the kind, places that have an abundance of moisture to keep them hydrated. We could easily have ones that are self-reinforcing and capable of significant adhesion, even in the most severe conditions, like skeletal screws and plates that self-heal. Yeah, exactly like that. This whole level provides an excellent example of what can be done with environments, mechanic, organic, or otherwise, that are living and animate unto themselves for their own purposes. Even to the big character that is the Doom guy, both literally in terms of size, also figuratively in terms of presence. Being able to be within such environs really affects the scale of whatever kind of scenario, setting, circumstance that we're dealing with. In the case of course, Doom, a massive hellfield corporation, but this is applicable in both the enlarging and minimizing interpretations that could be drawn from these kinds of scenarios universally. And where I think this has the utmost potential is not strictly just within 3D media, but in the literary, the tabletop, where you have the potential not only to expound in direct detail everything that is within that environment, thereby limiting the imagination to what is immediately visible, but opening it up to the means of inference that one may draw and the additions that can be made ad hoc, either directly by listing them in numeration, or indirectly, as by making a generic description. I think that it is, actually. Oh no! She Mass Effected herself! And she chose the red ending, too. Oh boy. Alright, renegade mode activated. Thus far, there is a very clear progression of interest and excitement, of level design, skill requirement, as in contrast to difficulty purely, environmental intrigue, narrative coherence, and integration of collectibles, where many games start off with a whole package presented to the player, prepared immediately to be dug into. 2016's Doom does a very interesting thing, where it left me feeling, at least, like it was just a fairly passable first-person shooter with a few Bethesda-isms thrown in. And over time, it has developed into something that I think is worthy of all of the praise that went into it originally. What started off as platitudinous tropes of the genre that this game is, have since turned into genuine developments in pioneering the feeling of Doom, of taking what was already a historic landmark title and updating it, elevating it above the standards of 2016. It has movement, style, sound, and it has form, not as a half-baked experiment, but as something that has clearly been refined into not an especially thought-provoking piece in its own right, but one that couches an invasion of hell in terms that, while phantasmic, do integrate with all of the standard features that we would expect out of alternative Earth and Mars. I thank you all for attending today, a look at the Communist Manifesto and finishing up with 2016's Doom. If you enjoyed this content, I hope that you do all of the liking, sharing, and subscribing that is so requisite for today's world. If you want to reach out to us, we have X, Instagram. You can also find us on Spotify and BitChute, along with TikTok. If you think that this is worth your monetary support, we have linked in the description Stream Elements, where you can make a one-time donation, Patreon, where you can get a subscription-based return on what you put into us, starting at $5 a month, where you'll have access to all of the content that we put out, and you will have your name here at the end of each stream for which you are a member. You'll be able to vote in any of our polls, which help to determine the direction of the channel. You'll have your own place in the Discord server, and you will have my greatest of gratitude. With that all being said, I hope that you all never miss your opportunity.